acsportstips.com. We have our Week 4 game analysis of a very intriguing matchup in Southern California with the California Golden Bears traveling to USC to take on the 13th ranked USC Trojans. We're going to give you some news and notes about both teams right now. Our prediction for this game will be up Thursday morning on our website and followed by a podcast on Thursday, www.acsportstips.com. Stay with us later in the week. We'll have a prediction for this game. Let's get right into it. We're going to start with the series breakdown of this series between California and USC. The last 8 matchups between the two teams has been dominated by USC. They're 8-0 over the last 8 years with an average margin of victory in 19 points per game. So, I mean, all trends favor USC, but we're going to look at the football matchup for this game. And what can you say about that meltdown at Stanford last week? Head coach Lane Kiffin has a motivational job on his hands because coming into this season, all eyes were on Lane Kiffin. The USC Trojans were off of probation. They were ranked number 2 early on in the country. Before the season, they moved to number 1. And after their Week 1 lackluster performance against Hawaii, they dropped to number 2. But they had their eyes and their hearts set on a national championship. They were led by their Heisman Trophy contender quarterback, Matt Barkley. He came back for his senior season looking for a national title, looking for the Heisman Trophy, and as of right now, those hopes and dreams seem to be dashed. How does this team respond at this point after their shocking upset last week to Stanford? They were outmanned physically. They gave up 417 total yards, over 200 yards rushing to that stout offensive line in Stanford, and running back Stephon Taylor for the Cardinals abused that defense for USC. How will they respond this week? Do they still feel they can get back into the mix, or did they pack it in now that they have their first loss of the season? That's the question for Lane Kiffin and his staff. Can he get his troops motivated to win out the rest of the year and get back into the mix? We have to see. Offensively for Matt Barkley, Marquise Lee, and Robert Woods, they were lackluster in all 3 performances this year. They were very lackluster early on in the win versus Hawaii. They jumped out early, but they weren't fluid in the passing game. The following week, they struggled on a neutral site against Syracuse, had to come on late with that game, and a lot of people, I think, just expected them to show up into Palo Alto and just get it going. They haven't gotten it going. They haven't been fluid. They haven't been on time. Their offensive game plan, they've showed some weaknesses on the offensive line. They showed some weaknesses last week in picking up blitz packages, and that's where USC struggled last week in the passing game. Stanford got pressure on the outside, on the edge, forcing Matt Barkley into intermediate passes. USC was not able to run on that stout Stanford front 7, and that made USC one-dimensional and forced USC into 3rd and longs, and California is going to look to do the same type of game plan going into this game. How does Matt Barkley and the rest of that offense fare going into this game? So we have to see. It is a home game. They have been bouncing around in terms of a lot of travel. When you look at USC, they opened the season at home at Hawaii. They won that game. They pulled along late in that game, late in the second half. They traveled from California to New Jersey on a neutral site to play Syracuse. They then traveled back to California to take on the Stanford Cardinal, but it wasn't a home game and it was a road game. Now they come back They're back home. They have done a lot of traveling over all 4 weeks. How does that affect the psyche and the mindset of the team? So I think they have some question marks on the offensive line, and look for California to try and exploit that through blitz packages. They need the running game and Silas Red to get going in this game to take some of the pressure off of Matt Barkley. You saw what Stanford did when they forced USC into third and longs. They became predictable, and then Stanford was able to blitz and put a lot of pressure and get to Matt Barkley. When Matt Barkley is able to sit back in the pocket and make his reads, he's as good as anybody in the nation. But when you blitz him like Stanford did last week, he was a little bit shaky in his reads, and that's what forced USC's hand. How do they respond this week? They've dominated the California Golden Bears over the last 8 years. It hasn't even been close. So will USC offensively be up for this game is the key question. Defensively for USC, they have some holes. Let's talk about them. They gave up 417 yards last week to Stanford. Over 200 of those were rushing, so they have some issues up front. The following week against Syracuse, they gave up 455 total yards, and they had to come on late in that game. They did not look sharp defensively against Syracuse. California should be able to move the ball. California has a very good quarterback and very good wide receivers. And last week against Ohio State, they showed they can run the ball. So defensively for USC, they are going to have to show that they can stop the run in order to win this ball game. Whether they can do it or not will be a major question, and we'll give our prediction a little bit later in the week. The game plan going in for USC has to be, we have to stop the run and get pressure on Zach Maynard, because if they allow Zach Maynard to pick apart their defense, they will be in for a long day. Look for USC to scrunch the line of scrimmage. They have to stop the running attack of California. California picked up over 200 yards last week, 224 in fact, on Ohio State on the road. Can USC stop California's running game will be the key question if they have a chance to win, and we'll break it down, like we said, later in the week. Let's talk about California. California and head coach Jeff Tedford is on the hot seat. We said it prior to the season. It became a lot hotter after their opening season home loss to Nevada. They dropped that home game 31-24. They won their second home game, a convincing victory. They went on the road last week at Ohio State and had a very good performance. Jeff Tedford's job is on the line, but his team is playing for him. They played a very emotional game last week and should have beaten Ohio State. They had a lot of miscues in the kicking game. They missed 3 field goals. Otherwise, California would have gutted out a victory on the road at Ohio State. They rushed for over 220 yards on the Buckeyes. 2 running backs, I.C. Sofeli and Brandon Bigelow, both had big games, and that led a 2-headed attack for the California Golden Bears. That allowed Zach Maynard and the passing game to get going, and he hit on big vertical passes down the field to his cousin, Keenan Allen. So if USC cannot stop the run going into this game with Bigelow and Sofeli, they could be in for a long day. The fact that California showed some life, it was a 9 o'clock, basically it was a 12 o'clock game Eastern time at Ohio State. Technically with the 3 hours difference, it was like a 9 o'clock home away game for California last week. If you look, traditionally, West Coast teams, when they start early games like that, do not fare very well, and California was in the game from start to finish. They're fighting for their head coach. They're playing for him, so expect California to be up for this game. Defensively, for California. They had some letdowns in that game in the secondary late in that ball game where Braxton Miller picked them apart and got some deep throws and connected on a long touchdown pass late in that game, and that's how California dropped the game. They're going to have to fix that going into this ball game against USC with a top-ranked passing attack in Matt Barkley and Lee and Woods. They're going to have to play a lot of zone. I don't look for California to play a lot of man. Look for them to play a lot of zone and force Matt Barkley into tough reads. Can they do it? We'll have to see. That's going to be a tough task for the California defense. They have struggled over the last couple of years against Matt Barkley, so they're going to have to come up with a different defensive scheme than what they've used in the past. So whether Coach Jeff Tedford can do that defensively is the question. He has typically struggled in defensive schemes, but last week he had a valiant effort, and for him, we hope it carries over this week. Look for California to use their running game because they built up last week against Ohio State. They held a 35 to 25 time of possession over Ohio State on the road. They're going to have to do the same type of approach with USC. They're going to have to control the clock and keep Matt Barkley off the field so that way they'll have a chance. Whether they can do that, we'll have to see. Defensively for California, can they double team both Marquise Lee or Robert Woods and get zone help to force the passing game into short throws? USC and Matt Barkley lives and dies with the long, deep ball. And like we said, California showed they're susceptible. They're going to have to change it up. They're going to have to force Barkley into quick reads and quick throws. And that's a major question heading into this ball game. Stay with us all week at www.acsportstips.com. We'll have our other game breakdowns, and we'll have a prediction of this game Thursday morning. So stay with us. College football is the best.